Here, we're just going to walk through every major section in the Nautical Almanac. This is probably the most important publication you're going to need for CellNav. It's updated every year because what it is just astronomical predictions for all of the celestial bodies. This is the book you're going to use to calculate the LHA of a body and its declination, both of which are necessary for you to then be able to calculate fixes. It's also got information on sunset, sunrise, on doing site reductions, how to correct for celestial versus visible horizons, for things like Polaris. There's a lot in this. Just know, like, if you need information on a star or a planet or anything of the sort, this is where you're going to get it out from for a given year. This one is 1981 because that's the year that STCW uses for all of its testing. But obviously, in reality, you'd be using an up-to-date one. So for right now, a 2023 edition. I don't know where it is, but I have a 2022 edition somewhere. Doesn't matter because this is the one that you're going to be using during your testing. Now, if we open it up, first thing, contents, whatever. Our first section here is altitude corrections. Like I said, what this is if you have, if you take a measurement with a sextant of the height of a body, this will allow you to correct for both the dip, which is the difference in what the celestial horizon, or what the horizon would be if you were at sea level versus what the horizon would be, what the horizon is at your position somewhere above it. You know, the higher you go up, the further out you can see, which in TNAV is good because it means you have more range, but in CellNav, it throws off your calculations because it changes the height of bodies above the horizon. So this section is for correcting for that. And then these sections here are for correcting from HA to HO, the thing I kind of glazed over before, the difference between your assumed or your applied altitude and your observed altitude. What that is when you get a measurement of, for instance, the sun, usually what you're going to do is you're going to have the sun sit in your sextant. You're going to have the sun visible sitting on the surface of the water. And that's how you're going to make your measurement. And you do it like that, where you have the lower limb of the sun hit the water because it's the easiest way to measure it. You could also do the upper limb of the sun hitting the water. That's fine as well. Not as common. You'd usually use the lower limb. The only problem is that all of the calculations that we have for the sun and for every body in this book is based off of their center. So you have to go from the bottom to the center and actually find what the height would be if the center were on the horizon. And that is what these tables, these sections here are for. They adjust from the bottom of the body to its center based off of the time of the year and things like that. So that's the difference between applied altitude and observed altitude. It just goes up from here to here. If we turn the page, we continue. This section accomplishes the same purpose, but for for measurements of bodies that are really low in the sky. So from on the horizon up to 10 degrees above the horizon. It's not good. It's not good practice to take a shot of a star that's like 9 degrees above the horizon. Because you're going to get atmospheric refraction, and these tables in part are supposed to account for that, but it's still not, like, why bother when you could just get something that's higher up and less likely to be impacted by these things. This also is accounting for refraction. This table is specifically applying the pressure in millibars and using that plus the temperature to find exactly how much the atmosphere is going to warp what you're looking at so that you can then make a correction for that. Again, just don't take a measurement that's so close to the horizon that this becomes an issue. Here we have some just introductory stuff. I don't even know why they include this, but there's a section listing all of the major holidays for the year. It's important to note the Nautical Almanac is I think it's a joint British-American publication. Might say on the back. I think it's mostly British though. And you can see right here a lot of this stuff this stuff is Catholic. But here we've got British holidays here. I don't know why they even bothered, why this is included, but it is. As well as this table, which just lists out what each day of the year, what day of the week it's going to land on. I suppose it's useful, but it's not really. It definitely would have been more useful in 1981 than it is now. Here's a section measuring eclipses of the sun. You don't need to know this. A little more introductory stuff. This is measuring what time, when meridional passage will fall during the day for every planet. Meridional passage being the equivalent of like high noon, when the sun or when a specific body is perfectly due north or south of you. This shows you how that fluctuates throughout the year. You also don't need that. Now we get into the stuff you actually need to know. These are called your daily pages. And you can see it goes on for the vast majority of your book is just daily pages. The reason for that is because it's explaining to you a perfect rundown of every single celestial body every single day of the year for all of 1981. Here is January 1st, and this is all the information for the constellation Aries, which we'll get into later why that's important. Everything you need to know for Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then across here is the sun, the moon, and we'll talk about this in a second. What it's listing here is the GHA of each of these bodies at every hour. The hours are measured in GMT. So you can see GHA, Greenwich hour angle. We talked about this before. Think of it as the longitude of the body. So for Aries, at midnight on January 1st, 1981, Aries had a GHA of 100 degrees and 33.4 minutes. At 10 a.m. in GMT time, it was 250 degrees, 58.1 minutes. Venus was 354 degrees, 17.7 minutes, and so on and so on and so on. This right here is the declination. So the latitude, the equivalent of latitude for each of these bodies. And it works the same way. At 1000, Venus had a declination of south 22 degrees, 1.6 minutes. There's no declination listed for Aries because it's a constellation and you only ever need its GHA. You don't need, well, first of all, there is no declination of Aries because it's a large area in the sky, but it doesn't matter. You just need its longitude. Here you have a section for all of the major navigational stars. I believe there's like 42 of them. The ones that are most easily identifiable and are used as like the major stars for CellNav. You'd see Arcturus, Doobie, Kochab, Markab, whatever. You'll get used to the ones that are the most common, like Arcturus is really common. Vega, wherever Vega is, there it is. Vega is important. Spica is important. What else? Alpheratz, kind of. Aldebaran. There are ones that you use a lot more than others. Anyway, then they've got their declinations listed here and their SHA, sidereal hour angle. We'll explain that later. Think of GHA, but if it was based off of Aries. Then over on this side, you've got the sun, all of its GHAs and declinations. The moon is complicated, which is why it's got all these little things off to the side of it. GHA, declination, and then these are multiple different types of correction factors. Don't worry about it. We'll get to that later. So those are all of the major navigational bodies that you could use. This is all for the first, the second, and the third. And if we were to skip over to here, decent amount. Now we've got May 25th, May 26th, May 27th. Over here are sections dedicated to calculating sunrise and sunset. It will show you what time sunrise occurred for every possible latitude, or units of 10 for the latitudes, or in some cases units of 5. You can then do some calculations to get them more precise for both nautical twilight, civil twilight, sunrise, then sunsets down here for the same thing. Moonrise and moonset, you do the same process for, but I've never done it. I mean, I don't think it would be any different. You should probably be pretty easy to go from one to the other, but I don't know why anyone would ever need moonrise. I guess it makes it lighter. Then at the very bottom here is meridional passage, which is just, like I said, high noon. So when the sun is actually directly overhead your position. It continues like this. At the bottom down here are just little correction factors for declination. We'll go into more detail about that later too. Continues like this throughout the entire year. All of this information is just repeated continuously. So you'll eventually be able to just really quickly pick out what section of one of these pages you need for any major information. See, now we're in August. December. Oh yeah, by the way, at the bottom here is the phase of the moon. Once again, not really important, especially because you can just go outside and see what the moon is doing. I guess unless it's overcast. Okay. Then we come to the very end of the year. You can see 30th of December, 31st of December, and then the 1st of January, 1982. This is the last page of the daily pages, and it works just the same as the others. Finally, you're at basic, like that right there is 3/4 of the book. Turn the page. We're done with the daily pages. This right here is just an explanation how to perform calculations throughout the daily pages. I will personally explain all of everything here. If you ever need a refresher, you can definitely read through this, and it's certainly helpful as long as you remember what all the terms mean. I've never needed it, but it's there in case you do. Continues on for a bit. These are time zones. Useful reference, not really for CellNav, but just in general for navigation, explaining what time zones or what central meridians each country or each region of a country uses for its central time, or if it has multiple time zones, what those are. Continue through. You can see right here is the US, and it lists each state as what time zone it uses. Here's a star chart in case you want to be able to actually work out what the constellations are, because separately, they don't really go over this in CellNav in class, but the first thing you need to do in CellNav is you need to find a star and take a measurement of it physically with a sextant. Even if you're incredibly good at all the math and all the plotting, if you can't find a star in the sky, none of this is helpful, because you'll never be able to perform any of it reliably. So you could use this as a means to, I guess, just memorize them. There are certain mnemonics and stuff and thought exercises you can use to remember them. Everyone knows where the Big Dipper is, and if you know the Big Dipper, you can find Polaris. That stuff's easy. But you could expand that to have a very comprehensive understanding of how the sky as a whole looks and what stars you can get off of that. Speaking of, these are minor stars. So the daily pages listed the 40 or so major stars that you use for navigation. If for whatever reason you really wanted to use a tiny little star that's of a really high magnitude, because by the way, the magnitude of a star, its brightness is measured as the lower number, the brighter. So a magnitude 1 is really bright. Wait, yeah, that's right. think so, yeah. And then higher ones don't really matter because they're dimmer and dimmer. Yeah, because it lists like these are all magnitude 3 to 3.7. So if you really wanted to measure get a fix off of a star that was like really dim and small and not important, you could find that star here. If for whatever reason you know that Beta Cygni was the one you measured, you could then get its SHA, sidereal hour angle, or declination for any point in the year. It's less accurate because they didn't take as many precise measurements because, you know, Epsilon Pegasi here, it's not an important star, but they have it available in case you ever needed it as well. Actually, in this section too, they do also list the major stars. So you can see Alkaid, Spica is on the list as well. It's just, this is to list like everyone you can see with the naked eye. Here are the Polaris tables. This is because, you know, Polaris being exactly due north or almost exactly due north all the time. Why is it not? There we go. Almost exactly due north all the time means you can use it for a lot of really good calculations. You can almost automatically, like with maybe 5 minutes of effort, find your latitude just off of Polaris. And these are the pages you use to make those calculations. It goes on for a little bit, but that's all Polaris stuff. Either finding your latitude up here or its azimuth down at the bottom. Here, you can see where my friend wrote sailing stuff in the margins so that he could cheat on qualifiers before license because you had to provide your own Nautical Almanac for that. But this section, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. This section here is for converting arc to time. So for instance, if you want to know how far the sun moves in 3 hours, 45 minutes, you could come right here, look through. There's 3 hours, 44 minutes right there. And you could see it's equivalent to 56 degrees of arc. Or if you wanted to know like how long will it take the sun to move 141 degrees of arc, well, you can see that that's 9 hours, 24 minutes. And then off to the side here is to calculate it more precisely to like minutes and seconds. I don't use this because we'll get to it later, but you can do this by hand really easily. There's no reason to come to this table. This table is literally just, it multiplies the number on the left by 4 to get the number on the right. So it's not necessary, but it's there in case you ever want a physical reference as opposed to just calculating it by hand. Now this section is called the increments and corrections. I also usually just refer to it as the minutes and seconds section because it is for correcting. If you remember in the daily pages, everything is based off of the hour. You can see right here, here's 1700 and then 1800 and then 1900. That's not very helpful if you got a measurement of the sun at 1945 and 37 seconds and you want to know what its exact GHA was and its exact declination was. So the minutes, let me get back to it. What the increments and corrections section does is it allows you to correct a value from just an hour to its exact amount of minutes and seconds. So if we use the example I just gave of 45 minutes, 37 seconds, you can see here's the minutes at the top of each page here. 44, 45, 46, 45 minutes right here. And then the seconds are down this top column here. So if we come down to 37 seconds, you can see that the sun would be 11 degrees and 24.3 minutes of GHA to the west of where it was exactly on the hour. And then its declination at 45 minutes. This takes a little more explanation, but I'll get to that later. But basically, you could find your exact GHA and declination by correcting this, or using this to correct the daily page. So that continues on. And we're almost at the end. Last few pages. Tables for interpolating sunrise and moonrise. This I also never have used because you can do it. You can do both of them off of the daily pages a lot more easily. Or I guess not even a lot more easily. I don't know how easy it is to do it off of this, but you don't need it to calculate sunrise and moonrise. But again, it's provided. Another index explaining like the major stars that you might use. This is just kind of going into a little more detail on them. And then the last page of the book is certain corrections for the moon. If you remember in the daily pages, the moon had a ton of stuff going on with it. It had all these little things off to the side, these correction factors. If you wanted to figure out how to deal with that, you would need to use these 4 tables. Or, Christ, these 5 tables here. It's a pain in the ass. It's also why people almost never take shots of the moon unless like they absolutely have to. If it's the only thing that's visible at night, then you could take a shot of the moon. But otherwise, just avoid it so you can avoid having to do this. I will go over it though. And that is the entirety of the Nautical Almanac. It's a lot of information, but that's a good thing. You'll get very well acquainted with flipping through this book and using, I would say, 80% of the stuff in it. It will all come in handy. And once you can learn how to use all of it, you'll be better off.